Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. I'm pleased to welcome my sister-in-law Sheryl to the podcast this week. We have talked together about education for many years. She has nuggets of wisdom to offer for treating students as people rather than numbers behind schoolroom desks. Sheryl has developed successful ways of encouraging children to think through their own answers and hopefully equip them for their life to look beyond what is the next thing. Who are you? What if? I wonder. These are all questions she taught her students to make part of their life. If you are part of a co-op, oversee a group of homeschooled children, or just your own, you will find her experience worthwhile to listen to. It also fits nicely into the series I am creating, The System is Failing Our Children. With so many years under her belt, Sheryl can see what is happening now in the modern school, or not happening, as she offers some practical advice for parents of school children wanting to help in their children's education. If you are a parent looking for advice or need a confidence boost, please contact me via my website cominghomeinfo.com and book a consulting appointment with me. Time to hear from Sheryl. So I am so grateful to you, Sheryl, for agreeing to sit down with me and talk through some of your wisdom and experience, because there are a lot of parents out there who would love to hear what you're saying. Can we start with, what is your background? How long did you teach for, Sheryl?
I taught for 40 years.
Wow, 40 years.
Pretty much my entire working career, a bit of time taken off for children, my own children. And a large part of that, by choice from me, was spent at intermediate level, year 7, year 8 level, because I found them having all these interesting aspects of their life that they were going through, and I could relate to that for them. It was a good pathway, even though they thought it was all difficult. Yes, but I love that age group.
And what age group is that?
7, 8, 11, 12, 13,
12.
yeah. And they're going through adolescence and all sorts of changes from being little kids to something else. And they're staring adulthood in the face. So, yeah, and puberty and all that. Yeah, I just found it really a cool place to be.
Can you kind of sum up, over the years, you've obviously been trained in what it is to be a teacher, you've developed some of your own techniques, but what would be your philosophy in education?
The big picture, if it goes into a sentence, would be I'd be asking constantly in my mind, or sometimes out loud, who are you? That would mean where you're at emotionally, each child. Where are you at emotionally? What are you interested in? What your thoughts are about being here at school? Just knowing the child. And then seeing that there's a child who's totally into rugby and not poetry, then there's no use doing a lot of poetry with him, but I could still rugby the poetry.
Of course.
And I've just turned rugby into a verb, I think. Yeah, who are you is a big question. That pops up in my mind all the time, and it did all the time too, as to what you're going to put in front of them to even read when they're not probably interested in that topic. And the way that they learn added to that. So a paint-by-numbers mathematician, yeah, like I said, isn't going to like fancy words and poetry and dreams and stuff like that. But there's plenty of other kids who, are.
So you could probably paint that to use your analogy, because you've got to do some standard things, don't you, in the curriculum? But as a teacher, you can help a child to, how do you say, who are you? Is that what you said? And you can pretty much put that through most subjects, I would think. That's actually a really helpful thing to have at your mind all the time, whether you're at home schooling or whether you're in the classroom as a teacher. Great, thank you. Anything else?
I'd spend time talking with the entire class on things like, right now we're going to be doing a topic on farming. So how do we go about that? And they might suggest that we go and live on a farm. I said, well, that's a bit difficult, so we won't go there. But we could visit a farm. Good idea. Modify some of the daft things, because they do at that age come up with daft things. Then there'll be how do we do this and what process do we go to get to the end. So let's start at the end, shall we? What would you like to know by the time we get to the end of this topic about farming? And then you spend a lot of time writing out, the kids at that point go and write down all their thoughts, what they want to find out. And there's your bit of paper for the whole class in front of them, what they want to know. Write it up on a big chart and stick it on the wall, and everybody's got their opinion there somewhere. They don't have to sign off if they don't want to, but that's okay. Their sentence, what they want. So that again is, who are you? What are you thinking? What's your thoughts about this subject? And all of our thoughts are different, so let's pile them all together and go for it.
Did you find that at that age the children were still able to respond to that kind of idea or question, or did you need to show them how to do that?
Oh, initially you'd show them how to do it. You'd have to, because I don't know many teachers that would do that way. We're all different. We're as different as they are. All different. But after a while they'd get used to my funny ways. Once we've got all that sorted and how we're going to do it and what we're going to cover and how we're going to do that, and they'll say journals, encyclopedias, internet, blah, blah. But it's all a big, huge picture, that one, so make sure that when you're doing your bit and you're going to be doing a piece of it each, and then we'll join it all together at the end and have a big share up. That keeps it simple, clear and unmessy for them. And it usually worked. And if they got stuck, well, they could come and ask me how to get unstuck.
Like, what do you think your purpose would be in educating, for instance?
Oh, big picture would be helping them with doing life. You actually do have to be able to read to do life and work things that maths out in your head on the go when you're driving or whatever. Other one would be interacting, letting your personality come out, who you are. So it's teaching the basics. It has to be done, like it or not. Well, there's another thing. You can do the basics under trees out in the playing field. And so I got to do a nice sunny day like this. It was a bit wet. And say, okay, guys, grab your books. And they would, because they knew what was coming. Where are we going? And so a guy, go find a tree and get your work done under the tree, and I'll check it when you come in. And they could, and they did. Could, because if they didn't, they'd be stuck in the classroom.
Next time.
So it's bribery. Yeah.
Or consequences, isn't it? Because they have to learn that too.
They do. And I'd say something daft like, in the corridor outside the toilets. No, just kidding. You can go out to the tennis court, that one there, and nobody's allowed outside it, and stuff like that. Or turn the maths into traffic. Watching the traffic, with lots of schools have cars going past. Making a graph with the car colours or what type of car went past and how many in a certain time, that sort of thing for graphing. Actual hands-on, eyes-on, doing.
And then graphing. So fulfilling what you had said before about, what was it, the purpose of education is to how to do life.
We're making the connection is when I would ask them, say, multiplication, whatever.
Sure.
So what's the point? Why should we bother with knowing the times tables, for example? And it's really good to know them off by heart, so we practice that. But why? Why do you need to do that? And they come up with reasons. They have to think a bit about it, and then the kids in the class usually sort of checked them and told them, nah, that doesn't make sense, or elaborate on what they said. So it becomes a class discussion.
About
what
why?
do you do what do you do with multiplication in life, or adding? what do you need to add? And subtract each of those and just pull it apart and think ahead and where they could, and just at that level, probably not hugely, but they would have a few ideas.
That's actually a really clever way to go about it, because rather than as the teacher telling them, here are the reasons why it's important to know your times table or read or do other forms of maths, you're getting them to think about it so they create their own reasons.
Yes. And that is the total basis of my thinking as fun education. If it doesn't come from them and someone says, oh, you've got to do this, that, the next thing, like learn the tables. If it doesn't come from them, it's not them. They're not going to be interested or involved. Their head might be, but the rest of them isn't. And they're not likely to be remembering things or applying things later that they've learnt because it was paint by... I call it paint by numbers.
Can you tell us what you mean by paint by numbers, Jen?
I suppose they all... So we're studying native trees, and they all are given a sheet of names of native trees, and then they all have to go and find some facts about the leaves of the native trees, where they grow and what trees surround them. Something like that, 3 questions. And they go and find out, and then they come back with the answers, and they're right or wrong. Tick, cross, stuff.
Like fill in the blanks type of approach.
Yeah. Not the other, would be out there in a forest, looking at leaves, pulling them off trees. Oh, sorry, tree. Looking at trees, and how come that leaf's like that, and how come... Getting them to ask questions that they can find answers to. Because leaves are all different when you look at them close up. I'd get them to pick off, say, 10 leaves that are native trees, and they'd already know from what I've told them which is what. And look at them and come up with some interesting reasons why the leaf is shaped like this and why all of these leaves are shaped like that. Then perhaps compare them with imported leaves or something. So all of it has to be doing stuff, and they have to know the reason for it.
So both versions, if you like, your paint by numbers analogy and the other one, which would be kind of like discovery, innovative based.
Yeah.
You're aiming for the same outcome.
Yeah.
But the quality of the outcome, I suppose, is going to be deeper.
I think so, because they see the point and they think they have learnt it. They think it's their thing, not the teacher's thing, and we have to do what the teacher says. They do, but they make it so that they can feel it's their understanding, their knowledge and their research and what they've found out. And that's going to stick in their lives and in their minds and in what they learned.
When I think about my experience going through school, because that was a lot of hours over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking back through the few times when something just like popped at me and I've like never forgotten it, or it was significant, or I can remember the time and the place in the classroom. Those times were probably experiential. I actually went through a process rather than just because most of it was teaching from up the front. That's it's a subtle but a very clear differing approach to education.
Yes.
And you've started to touch too on drawing out students' natural gifts. And that would be primarily from giving them these opportunities for experience in their education. How else would you do that? Because you've got a classroom of approximately how many children?
30 plus. Yeah.
30 plus. So how are you going to not individualise that child's opportunities to bring out their natural gifts, but what are some practical ways if you do have the responsibility of being, let's say, in a classroom or a co-op or even just a large group of children, how would you apply that based on some of your ideas to draw out those students' natural gifts without becoming overwhelmed yourself just because of the sheer number of them?
It happens if you're involved with the children, not sitting at your desk looking at them or growling at them. This way you're hearing who they are all the time, if you're into it. I was never sitting down that I can think of very much, marking things. That happened into the midnight hours at home, and it had to be done. But you're involved with the children, and they're involved with each other, and also involved with themselves. They're looking at themselves as well. So I would know that there's a group of probably girls who would be interested in puberty or those, because there are stories in some of the journals, not specifically journals, that are fun ones that they'd be interested in, and boys being boys, different aspects. So that's how you group them for, say, reading. But you just figure it out. If you're interested, you'll find out, because you talk to them as well.
Interested. I'm just thinking of teachers who aren't interested.
Yeah.
Oh, we've had our share of them, haven't we?
Yes.
You've mentioned before about starting off with the children with a I wonder. Let's stop and talk about that for a little while. How do you get a child to go beyond that? Because that really does require a thinking outside of maybe what they haven't been allowed to think about. Just sit down, be quiet and hear the lesson kind of attitude. And now this new teacher that they've got this year is telling them that they can do something different. So how do you guide them through teaching them how to go, I wonder? How do you finish that sentence in a child's life in a practical way?
With the I wonders, for a start, I'd had a big sheet of paper and felt pens, and during the day or the week they wrote down, I wonder why bees buzz, etc. And so that's how you get that all over the board, and then you'd sit down when you've got enough of the I wonders on the board and sit and just keep reminding them over a couple of weeks. Have you written any I wonders yet on the board? You know. And then it's a collation thing. They pick out, look at them all, which they already have anyway, and figure out how we can go about figuring that out. What's the next step?
So do you, as the teacher, take those I wonder questions that are evidence that a child is actually thinking, and do you shoehorn that into part of what is required from the curriculum, or was that?
Yes, because I would know through being what I am, a teacher, what the curriculum is, and I have to know that. So when I see something in social studies that somebody's wondering about, then we use that, and then we will all, or several of them, make it round to, and I pop in words that were around where we're aiming for in the social studies program at year 6 or 7 or whatever. I'd even put that in front of them and say, this is what we're supposed to know at this, but by the end of the year, what the curriculum says, and go through that. Why not? So they're actually creating their own, the process, and learning the curriculum style, because they look at that as well.
So as part of your personal interest in them as a teacher, I'm picking that you're hoping that they're going to use this as a habit, or learn the habit of always going, well, what happens if this was to happen? And what about if that happened? So if you go back to your why do bees buzz, for instance, well, how do they buzz? And what happens in the rain? And what happens in the hive?
That's it.
And may they never ever stop asking those questions.
Exactly, yeah. They'd be asking them initially too, even if it's just verbal, but I'll probably be taking notes and putting it onto a chart, those kind of questions initially, and they're the ones that initially they would answer, and then they'd realise that more questions popped up when they weren't looking. They're looking for an answer to that one, and some other, right, and they have to know that that's good, that the more questions pop up, they should. I'd wait for them to do it, and then I'll let them in on the big surprise. You are now officially learning, because you've got something you want to know and you want to find out about it, and you're going to find out you've learned.
That's an amazing gift to give a child, because if they have developed that discipline of starting to ask questions and to ignite that curious flame again, which has often been snuffed out at that stage, they're never going to stop doing that, or that's the hope. And what a gift to give a child that.
In the 60s time of education did all sorts of crazy things too, which released a lot of us teachers to do mad things, and I think it's still lingering.
So let's jump forward a bit, because you have been in the school system for a long time. You must have seen so many changes which would be a book in itself. Fast forward to modern day schooling, Sheryl, what you must have been seeing perhaps as you were coming to a close in your teaching years, and what have you seen happening after that? Let's do what you saw the changes coming through towards the end of your teaching career. Were all those changes good? No, nothing can be all good as changes, but there must have been some good changes. But what about the things that were starting to come through as teaching philosophy and being taught to the teachers coming through the colleges? What concerned you back then? And then we'll jump into what you see going on now. So start with towards the end of your career.
The same thing with education and the people who were being trained to educate was you've got to achieve this, and this, and it's all written down in sentences what you have to do. And there's nothing coming from you to that. It's all that to you, coming out of you. It's coming into you. So with the levels, level 1 knows this, and this level 2 knows that, level 3, and all that, they can be jumbled up together. And people coming out of college were a bit, is pedantic the word, in that respect too. They had to da-da-da. I was starting to be fearful for the lack of interest they were creating in the children. See them picking their noses and looking around the room, not listening for a start, that sort of stuff. If you haven't got their attention, you haven't got them.
Do you think that was an outcome of how these students were being taught to teach?
Yes. And the outcome then has been with children I have seen, they're not interested in school. Little ones, year 4, year 5, not interested, it's boring. Because it's come right through to that and it hasn't changed. And it's got more and more pedantic. How do you bore kids? They just sit there and stare into space. They're not involved. So it was all outcomes and how to achieve them, and it was on bits of paper and you ticked it. So I didn't like that because it's people we're dealing with, not products in a factory.
Not commodities.
No. That's the difference, the more of that. And over here at the start, there was lots of involvement of the people side of things and life and being a bit crazy, if you like, because kids are allowed to be, if they're allowed to, and to a very pedantic, paint by numbers style. And they have to achieve this, and this, and then even those phrases were vague. They always have to be assessed. That's the thing, the word assessment constantly was there. It doesn't have to be there all the time, sitting, tick, 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 cross, cross.
But from what you told me before of how you were managing a classroom, you'd be constantly in a mode of assessing.
It happened anyway. Let's assume that teachers are fairly intelligent people.
That's a good start.
Not, all what somebody up here says they have to achieve. I understand that you at different stages, but some people don't understand stuff at 6 and they understand it at 8 or 10.
So let's jump forward then to what we're seeing now, because we all have children in our lives that we can see and assess what's going on. What are the concerns, Sheryl, that you see now in modern schooling in New Zealand?
When a 10, 11 and 12-year-old child, how's school? Boring. And they're not being horrible. This is not a ghastly child. That probably pretty much says it all. That's why teachers should be out there taking the kids out under the trees or going for a walk and counting traffic if you're doing maths.
Don't they do that?
No.
I want to be bored.
For a few children that I know are saying school is boring.
So it's not just a one-off thing with a child. You're seeing it. Do you see any problems with what is being taught and how it's being taught? And the reason I ask that is because recently I found out that more than 50% of teen children in New Zealand leave school functionally illiterate and enumerate. More than 50%. What is that? Is that what they're being taught, or is it how it's being taught? What do you see?
It's got to be how they're being taught. We should get out of a mindset that says everything that's paint by numbers, like chanting the times tables. Do it. What's wrong with that? You have to. That's part of it. If you ever say, go and get 5 leaves and 5 nails, and that's going to take forever for them to remember the tables. In the end, the tables have to be chanted over and over and over again to stick in your brain. But we've got fearful of that too, because it's whatever.
Or has the philosophy changed in that they thought that a child would learn by experience their times table? If they use it and use it, then they'll just learn it.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't work.
And so timetables is the one you can. Yeah, that's the main thing. You've got to have them. You've got to have them like you've got to have feet.
It's a good analogy. So there's no shortcut around times table.
No,
just learn the times table.
Yeah, chart them off. Have a whole week or 2 weeks on 3 times table.
So what do you say to someone then that says, I don't need to do that because I've always got a calculator or something on my phone to do that? And your answer would be?
You can't say to them, well, what about when you don't have your calculator, because they've always got it. Wouldn't it be handy to have, 3 9s pop into your head, 3 times 9 pop into your head?
Just quicker. Just
as quick as that, rather than it's a whole lot quicker. And it happens throughout the day, different times you have to do the maths, that sort of maths.
And you'd know it too. If you've learned something by rote, you just know that you know that you know.
Yeah.
But if you pop it into a calculator on your phone or otherwise, well, if you touch a wrong number by mistake, how are you going to know that 3 times 7 is actually 21, not 25, because you touched another number by mistake?
Yeah, exactly. Have both. You don't have to throw out the old clothes that you've got just so you can wear new ones. Some of us keep both lots in our wardrobes, We don't throw out all our shoes every year. That's life. Keep it. And some stuff is worth keeping. And so there's tons of examples in life where those sorts of things pop in. So that should be the times tables as well. Even if you're not interested in maths, you'll find out that you'll be using it.
So if we've got a more than a 50% failure rate in adults functioning or not functioning with basic reading and writing, what's gone wrong in there, do you think?
Well, instead of reading books, for example, even if they're little brief books and colourful books and stuff, they're on their phone all the time. And even though mum says, put it away, they go and watch TV. It's a screen time world now, it seems. And reading books is remembering the words, learning the words. Oh, you don't know what that word is, so you read the whole sentence and that's what it could be because it makes sense. That word that's odd becomes unodd because it makes sense in the sentence when you read it a couple of times. That sort of skill, I thought you did naturally, but maybe we taught it. And if they're not using or not doing reading, they're just not filling in the gaps that are created in life, for one thing.
So have you noticed then in children that you observe that there is that they might not have a very broad vocabulary because they're not reading those words that they then have to figure out where they fit in context?
I'm not seeing anything written, no stories, and I encourage stories, but nothing comes. They just go to school, basically.
A holding place.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's sad, isn't it?
That's how it's changed. They don't really want to go to school.
They must have, though, what they want to do. We used to say, when I grow up, I want to be all kinds of things. Most were totally unreasonable when you were that age. However, to be whatever you want to be when you're growing up, let's talk about being a pilot. What would a child who does not know their times table need to be doing in order to reach that goal, potentially to be a pilot?
One of these little children is determined to become a jet pilot, and it saddens me to think that she can't and probably won't unless somebody points that out to her. This gets you to there. So that's another thing, that by justifying not only to yourself what you're teaching, but justifying it in front of the children. You're doing this because all the time. And they'd tell me why they were bored, and then I'd tell them why they're learning this, and then what do you think I should do to make it unboring? All sorts of stuff would come through, and I'd modify it, of course. So the other thing there is that involving children in their own learning has got to be happening. You've got to see the point. And if they don't, they get bored, and I don't blame them.
But when you think of what the children are already telling us what they want to do when they grow up or when they leave school. So you have an end result, and if you did a little bit of digging around, you would find out, well, what's required for you to reach that goal? Because you mentioned before about starting with the end result and then working backwards.
Yeah.
So if the child can see that, okay, I want to fly a plane, or I want to be an amazing cook who designs new food. Well, what do you need to get there?
Yeah.
And if she or he can see back here, well, to up my chances of being a really good pilot, I probably need to know my times table.
Yeah.
Then that gives the reason, doesn't it? So it moves beyond boredom.
Yeah. And it's applying it to them personally.
Yes, but how does the child actually get that message coming through? Because unless the teachers at school are doing that, or the parents or the significant others in that child's life are doing that, they're going to miss it. So let's just move into then, how can parents help their child's learning at school if they are aware that there are gaps in their children's education, or they don't know their times table, or they struggle to read? Have you got any really practical, simple bits of advice for a parent who they don't know what to do? It's been so long since they were in school themselves, and for all we know, they were also bored.
The times tables, for one thing. I keep coming back to that, but you have to know them. So the times tables should be chanted. Start with the 2s and chant them at breakfast, lunch and tea time and before bed, and put them on the wall. When they go to the toilet, they're on the door.
I love that idea.
When they're sitting on the loo, and they have to say them 4 times before they come out of the toilet. Saying them too, chanting them. This is no use going 2 times 3 all by itself. Yet they have got to do one. They don't bring 2 to 1.
So do you think there's something in that methodology of the actual chanting that has a purpose?
Yes.
Is that because it's got something to do with nuance and poetry, and that because it just changes something from a sentence? It's given it a hint of music.
Yeah, it has. That might be the pedantic bit, but you've got to know that. Everybody knows you've got to know those things. And I think once they do the 2 times table and then they Skype and say, well, I know it now, then the parents can test them, right, 2 3s, too slow. Straight away they have to give the answer. So that means it's in there popping out without thinking.
What about reading? How can a parent help a child who is struggling with reading, or let's say you're not very impressed with the reading material coming home from school to home? How does a parent choose a good book? Because there are just too many to choose from. Yeah. What would you look for as a parent when you're looking for a good book?
They should be able to go to the library or bookshop with the child and look at what the child can read quickly, put that one down, find something that's easier for them to read. I think that's the only way you can do it. And if they're young ones, then simple books with 1 sentence and a picture on each page will get them keen. Preferably something they already know as well.
What about older children then who do have a certain amount of literacy? They probably know their phonics pretty well, and they've got a good range of sight words. So now they're on to the coveted level of chapter books. How would you choose a good chapter book?
You'd have to spend a bit of time in a library, I think, poking around with the child, and they're saying, oh, that's too hard, or that's easy, or I'm not interested in dragons, or whatever. So it's the topic. Topic would be the number 1, I suppose, and that's who they are.
Is there anything else on your mind or that you've written down that we haven't chatted about yet?
I would also suggest that somehow parents sit around meals tables and chat while they're eating. And sorry, I'm saying this, turn the TV off for an hour or so. It's going to be a phone-free moment, whether you're eating tea together or just puttering around the house. Turn it off. See what happens.
Radical of you.
I mean, you might even communicate.
So sit around and chat.
Yeah.
Any suggestions as to what about? If they're not accustomed to this habit, you have to learn that. How would you get started, Sheryl?
You'd start by saying, what did you do today? It's boring, but gets you started, and then you'll hear bits you can go off to the side of. So what did that kid say to you? And where did you play, and what happened? What was the game? talk about what they did at school even.
So that's actually another really practical thing that a parent can do. And it's not hard.
No.
We don't need to spend a lot of money or learn how to do something. It's just placing new habits in your life. And to be fair, a lot of parents need to learn that art of conversation and listening. So it's good for everybody. What are the advantages of sitting down and doing that?
Oh, it's just interaction. It's a people thing. They don't seem to do it at home. They do it at school, I guess. If they knew the TV wasn't going to go on until after the news or something, or when the news comes, so they had all afternoon to go out and play. That's interacting as well. But I don't know that happens. And there used to be a time when we were little was bedtime stories. When you're starting on a new piece of work, do some skim reading first, and from that they pick out words that they know, and what's that word, and you can tell them, and then turn it into creating an interest. I wonder what this is about. What do you think?
So you're telling the child to skim read something?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're looking at and picking out words that they know, maybe, and then words of interest. So what do you reckon this is going to be about, this article or thing that we're going to read? And they can have a bit of a think about it beforehand. No, nothing serious and dreadful, just it's getting them into it.
It's still a good skill to cultivate.
Just have a skim read, and you see words without thinking, and they pop into you. Oh, so it's about, and then go back and read it properly, so to speak. But you're zooming in on a word and other things, so it's making them jump into the text, if you like. For reading, they must know how to read. To do pretty much everything. To do maths, you need reading. For social studies, you need reading. Science, you need reading. Everything, all those other things need the basics that you're learning when you're young. Why do we want to be quiet in class?
That's a good question. It doesn't come easily to children, unless they're very interested in something and they're concentrating. So, why?
So then I'd ask them to fire at me all the answers to that. Why do we have to be quiet at class? And at times, not all the time. And they would come up with, so other people can read, so other people need time to think, so the teacher's asleep.
The teacher can sleep.
They would. Yeah, but why? See, the things that you do, and you say, hey, thou shalt. No, it works better if they have it coming from themselves. Coming to be quiet because I can see so-and-so's learning.
That doesn't come naturally to a child, does it? So that's a really practical way, again, is part of your skill and wisdom coming through. Put it on to the child and try and get them to think about it. Kids are really smart.
Yes.
Give them a chance and they will come out with the most intelligent, wise things that will blow you away.
We do. We underestimate them. If you're asking the right questions, things will happen.
Thank you, Sheryl. Thank you so much for your experience and your wisdom. It's been so interesting, sounds underwhelming. It's been a fascinating insight to your history as a teacher, but some very practical things, actions, whether you're homeschooling or whether your children are in the school, some very practical things to do. I think there are going to be some parents who are incredibly grateful that we took the time today to sit down and chat, turn the recorder on, and just let you download. Thank you so much.
Oh, I loved it. Taking me back. Thank you.